Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our first ever YouTube live interview with RKL23. My name is Sophia Pascuzzo. I am the Customer Marketing Associate here with RKL eSolutions. Today we have Alex Lyons, a sales executive with Avalara. But first, before we get started with the interview, I have a few housekeeping items. So we would love for you all to participate and ask questions through the chat. So for anybody who's on a desktop, you can find the chat to the right of the video. If you are on a mobile, the chat is going to be underneath. You have to make sure that you are signed into YouTube to be able to use the chat. So to get things started, we have a kind of fun question that I'm going to put up on the screen, and you can feel free to answer it in the chat. So I'll do that right now. So we have this question here. Not all candy bars are created equal. What ingredients turn a taxable sweet treat into a non-taxable food item? And feel free to just put your guess in the chat now. We have it's either flour, chocolate, sugar, or nuts. Anybody have any guesses so far? Oh, wait, a few more seconds. Okay, so the answer is actually flour. Flour, even licorice contains flour and is not considered a candy. Same is true for Kit Kats, Twix, Hershey's, cookies and cream, and crispy M&Ms. So just a fun fact to start out our live today. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and we'll go right into it. So Alex, thank you for joining us. It's hard to believe we're already 2 months into 2023.
I know, it's going by crazy fast, and it's crazy. I'm in North Carolina and it's 85 degrees today. It's like a record high for my area, and I love it, but I also feel like we're getting faked out a bit, but
yep,
I am ready for warm weather.
Yes, and speaking of 2023, I know Avalara released their annual tax changes updates for 2023. Are there any top trends you want to share with our audience?
Yep, we did release those, and some are really interesting. I have a couple of stats sort of written down I was going to read off to everyone. So digital revenue hit $251 billion in the third quarter, which was huge. 20.6% of all dollars spent on retail purchases last year came from online orders. So these are just a few things that we had found during that update. And then also, according to the International Monetary Fund, global growth is forecast to slow from 6% in 2021 to 3.2% in 2022, and then 2.7% in 2023.
Wow, thank you for the facts. Another important trend still mentioned is the economic nexus laws as a result of the 2018 federal Supreme Court ruling Wayfair versus South Dakota that allowed states to impose sales tax collection remittance on remote sellers. Can you speak a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and this is something that I feel like people assume that the conversations around South Dakota versus Wayfair have died off. And I will say, and I didn't really introduce myself at the beginning of this, but I have been working in the Sage world here at Avalara for about 5.5 years. So I was here before Wayfair happened in 2018, saw Wayfair through, and then now obviously we are years past Wayfair, and I'm still talking about this case on just about every call I have with a customer or prospect. So something I will mention is there are 45 states that have sales tax. In addition to the 45 states, there's also DC and Puerto Rico who have enacted economic nexus laws in the past 3-4 years. So pretty soon, effective, or actually, I guess it already is in effect, Missouri was supposed to be launching their economic nexus threshold in January of this year. So that's another new one. So we're still seeing changes come down from economic nexus. Nothing has gone away. I know a lot of people that I talked to when Wayfair first happened back in 2018 were sort of hoping this would fade out. It has not. If anything, it's gotten a little bit worse, I would say, on small businesses to try to keep up with. And honestly, I think the last stat I heard was there's about 90% of businesses that have been surveyed have been impacted by the economic nexus laws that happened in 2018. So I do certainly work with a lot of customers, even now, who are still sort of trying to understand how that case impacted their business and how it's going to impact what they need to do on a move forward basis from a sales tax perspective.
Nice. Okay, and what are some tax changes / activities that could really trigger a physical nexus?
So yes, physical nexus is something that I think gets ignored a lot because the Wayfair ruling was such a highly publicized event that happened back in 2018. And whenever I talk to people, physical nexus gets ignored a lot. So it is an important question to ask about, like, what causes physical nexus. People assume it's just where they're physically located, where their office is, where they're sitting. And that's just not true. The state started to manipulate physical presence laws years ago before Wayfair happened to try to require businesses that were selling across state lines to have to deal with sales tax in their state. So something that I see a lot is trade show attendance. That is probably one of the biggest ones. I see people sort of be unaware that that affects nexus. So if you do attend trade shows in other states, that's something that creates physical nexus for your business. Also, if you've got any remote employees, I know like post-pandemic, a lot of people were able to start working from home. And a lot of people moved to different states because they can live wherever they want. They can work wherever they want. That definitely impacts physical nexus. So if you have employees that sit in other states, sales visits, so if you've got people who visit and clients for sales calls, or even just any kind of meeting, installations, anything really that puts anyone from your business in another state on behalf of the business is something that can be viewed by most states as physical presence. And so that is something that gets missed a lot when we start talking about economic nexus, because that has been such a big thing that the physical falls to the wayside, but it's still very important.
Yeah, I think that remote work that's been very prevalent in the last couple of years. I think that's really important to know. Again, so the 43 states that have adopted economic nexus laws since the Wayfair decision follow a similar structure to South Dakota, but thresholds vary from state to state. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, so all of the states are different. It's like all things sales tax related. Nothing can be just simple, unfortunately. A lot of the states have dollar thresholds or dollar amounts listed. I know, for example, California and Texas, two of the bigger states, their thresholds are $500,000 in sales. And then other states have smaller dollar thresholds, but they also include a transactional threshold. So some might have a 100 as their number for transactions. A lot of them are 200 transactions. And then some states look at both. So for example, North Carolina, I believe, is $100,000 in sales or 200 transactions. So when you when you see the states that have the transactional limits, I think where people get caught up on that is you could sell something that's not really that expensive, but if you're hitting that transactional limit, it could require you to get registered and have to deal with sales tax in that state. But yes, every state is different. And also a common misconception is that this only impacts retail sales. in the Sage world myself, most of my customers actually are not just selling direct to consumer. Most of them are manufacturers and distributors. And so most of their sales are tax exempt. I think 35 of the 43 states that have adopted economic nexus are actually looking at gross sales. So that is something that a lot of people are surprised to find out, because they are just kind of making the assumption that this only impacts like e-commerce businesses that are selling retail. And that's just not true.
Yeah, and is it safe to say, so if they want to know more about a specific state, they can reach out to you or anybody?
We have a page on our website that has been an excellent resource, and I can certainly send it out, or you can just simply Google Avalara economic nexus thresholds, and it'll probably get you there. But we have all of the states listed out, as well as what each individual state's threshold is. And so when you look at that page, actually, it will go into the details of if the states do look at gross or retail sales. It goes into those transactional limits. So it provides you with all of that information on a by state basis. We also have a free assessment on the website that you can complete that allows you to answer questions from each state based on how much you're selling. And it sort of generates a quick report on, hey, these are states that it looks like you're either maybe having had economic nexus or you're getting close to having economic nexus in these states.
Yeah, and we do have that free tool available on our RKL23 Avalara landing page as well, just for anyone.
And that one, Sophia, I'll bring up, that's a little bit different. So we have two free tools. Yeah, so we have two free tools. Glad you brought it up. So one free tool is the one I referenced on our website, on the Avalara website, which is going to look at just economic nexus. So it honestly is sort of a marketing tool. It allows people to just get some quick information about Avalara, but it only looks at economic nexus. So what Sophia is referencing on the RKL website is actually even better. And if this is something that anybody listening has a question about, this is actually where you want to start, in my opinion, rather than the Avalara site, is a free sales tax risk assessment. So we have launched this promotion this year with RKL to offer a free risk assessment to RKL customers. This is a service that typically costs $4,500 with Avalara. So it's a really, really great deal. But it looks at economic nexus, but also physical nexus. So it is a really, really cool tool to help you understand where you stand as a business. If you do have any sort of compliance concerns, it will allow you to go through and answer questions state by state, specifically what activities are happening in each state. So it's going to ask questions about how much you're selling, also questions about what physical activities you may have conducted in those states. When you complete that questionnaire, you will be provided with a really detailed report explaining to you where your company may have created nexus. And also it's going to give you sort of a synopsis of the last 12 months in terms of, do you have any tax liability? So it's a really, really great screenshot kind of where do we stand? What do we need to do as a business to maybe get on the right track? So if anyone listening does have any concerns, definitely do that risk assessment. And that's something that when it's completed, I can also help facilitate a review call with one of our internal tax advisors to kind of help you understand what those results look like.
Great, thank you. Thank you for explaining that difference, the difference in the assessments.
Sure.
This has been really great. Is there any other important trends that you want to mention?
I think that we'll talk a little bit about what I'm seeing with like RKL customers over the last year. I think one of the big things that are triggering conversations with us as a tax provider are a lot of businesses are launching e-commerce sites. I know post-COVID, even some of my manufacturing customers, are launching ways to sell online, which is really changing how they need to manage their sales tax compliance. So any of you out there who are maybe considering e-commerce or have maybe launched e-commerce, anytime you're making a change like that, it's always good to have a conversation with, someone like myself or, your tax accountant, just to find out what sort of repercussions that could bring on from a sales tax perspective, because it can really quickly change things in terms of where you maybe need to be registered. A big thing too is not always necessarily having to charge more sales tax. It may just be a matter of making sure that you're doing a better job of managing exemption documents from your customers. And so, you can't really do anything when you don't know to do anything. And so having a conversation with myself, or like I said, a tax accountant, would help you kind of understand, or doing the risk assessment just tells you, okay, where are you kind of missing the mark? And what sort of activity do you need to do to make sure that you're on track if you get audited, that you've got what you need. And a lot of times in the Sage world, what you need are exemption certificates. So it's not always just a matter of charging sales tax. So I would say that's what I see a lot of, or just people changing the way that they sell. And then also, because they're changing the way they sell, having to adapt to what they need to maybe have on file to cover themselves in an audit.
Great, thank you. If there's any more other questions for Alex, feel free to drop them in the chat right now. We'll answer anybody's question about Avalara, about Nexus, anything. So I'll pause for a couple seconds if there's any questions. We do have a comment in the chat, just that the assessment's a valuable tool. A lot of CPAs charge at least $5,000 or more for the Nexus study. So just a little comment there about the free assessment that we're offering.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I've actually had someone say that they got a quote of like $15,000 for a Nexus assessment. Wow. So yeah, it can be very expensive. And to maybe provide some peace of mind as to how we're able to do that for free right now, we have all of the information around what is creating Nexus built into a questionnaire. And so really we've been able to somewhat automate the process of getting you those answers. So that's the reason why we're able to do it for so cheap to free at this point with the promotion. Whereas like accounting firms, when they are doing this for a customer, they're having to manually do research. So it does take a lot of time to do that. It's a lot of hours. And so the reason we're able to do it for free is just because we have that data. We just need to compare it to your business activities.
Yep, makes sense. Any other comments, questions? Drop them in the chat. Okay, we do have another question. How long will the assessment be at no charge?
As of right now, I believe it's through the end of this calendar year. Yep. And I'm hoping that stays that way, but we'll see. But right now it is through the whole year. I will say that if it's something that you're considering doing, it's always better to do it sooner rather than later, because the longer you wait, the worse the results can look if you do have any tax liability. So just keep that in mind.
Yep. And another one, what is an example of a physical Nexus activity?
Trade shows, like I mentioned, are definitely a physical Nexus activity. The installations are one I see in the Sage world a lot. If you've got people who go on site to do like installations or repairs, that's a physical Nexus activity. Really any activity that puts an employee in another state on behalf of the business.
Great, thank you. And I'll pause again if we have any other questions. And we do have another one. Can Avalara help us reduce penalties or fines that may be uncovered from non-compliance?
Yes, we can. Avalara can, and also a lot of accounting firms can. So I don't want to say it's just us, but through the Nexus study or the risk assessment, a lot of times that is the first of many steps that have to sort of happen to get you on the path to compliance. The risk assessment identifies what states you do need to register in that you're not. And then usually the next step after that is to take a look at each individual state that you do have Nexus in to discover if there might be any tax liability. If there is tax liability, that's where we can help make a recommendation for how to get set up with that state. A lot of times what would be necessary if you do have sort of excessive liability is something called voluntary disclosure. So each state offers a program called voluntary disclosure, which is an amnesty program that allows you to enter the state anonymously. And that is a process that Avalara can help you with. So when you enter the state anonymously, it guarantees penalty and interest abatement. So the penalties on liability can range from 20 to 50% depending on the state. So it can get really, really expensive really quickly. With voluntary disclosure, you're guaranteed abatement on penalty and interest. So that really helps. Also, the states are often going to limit the look back period to where it might be 7 years. It might limit your look back period to 2 or 3 years. So that helps from a tax liability perspective. And then also the states will usually work with you on payment terms as well through that program. So there's a lot of benefits to entering through voluntary disclosure. But in order to do that program, you have to know if you need it, which is sort of why the risk assessment is so important, because it helps you figure out, do we have any issues that we need to look at before we start maybe just getting registered.
Yep. Thank you. Okay. And I'll pause again a little bit longer, just if we have any last minute questions. Okay, so I don't see any other questions. I'll still monitor the chat, but I just want to say thank you, Alex, for all the important information and updates with Avalara. For those of you that did not register already, please make sure you register on our page. I'm putting the link in the chat right now, and that way we can send you a special gift just for attending today's live event. So you can go to that page and register. If you already have done so, then you're all good. But you will also be entered into a drawing for swag that we will announce at the end of March. But with that, I'm going to close with a short commercial break right now.
Thanks to Avalara, we can calculate sales tax on almost anything, anywhere automatically. Avalara.
What if tax rates change? Filing sales tax returns. Managing exemption certificates. Business license guidance? Does it connect with accounting? Item classification, cross-border sales. What about...
Do you have those budget markups? Thank you.
Okay, and with that, I just want to say again, thank you for joining everybody, and we'll see you next time with RKL23.
Bye, thank you.